Okay, so I'm at men's breakfast today, and Russ and I got talking before Pastor Brad went on to speak, and it got into his heart that what I was talking about, he thought I needed to share with the rest of the congregation. And so the first thing I started off with was that what Pastor's been talking about for the last 2-3 weeks is about prospering under the provisions of God and how hard we have to work at that. And I was saying to Russ that this has been my lived experience. So about 15 years ago, God called me out of construction and into the child and youth care working program. And initially I left a position as the foreman of a company, and of a construction company. And we were doing well, like we were doing all right in that. But God called me into working with kids, and every single step since my beginning of doing this career, God has overseen and watched over. So he wanted me to do like this talk. So what happened, and I'm just going to start at the beginning, was that I had a dream, and God told me that I needed to change careers. And because I'm changing careers, he's going to watch over it. So he watched over it, and what he did was, I had to go back to school to become a child and youth worker when I was 29 years old. And actually probably 27, 28. And then what happened was, as my career and school was combined, and I had to have these times where I had to work, but I also had to go to school. My job afforded me the ability to go to school, even though they knew I was going to school for something completely different than what I was doing with work. They allowed me to go to school and work without firing me, without doing anything, and God prospered that. And so because then when he prospered that, I got hired before I was even done school in my profession that I was training to do, and they also did the same thing. They let me work while I was finishing my education. And the minute that, literally the next day after I graduated, the next day I was full-time with that employer. I worked with that employer, and God prospered me at work, and I built a reputation as being extremely good at my job. And then eventually I was allowed to choose what role I wanted to have at that job. And then when I hit sort of the top end of that job, where I was working, where I was whatever, all of a sudden God called me out of that and put me into the school board. And when I mean called me out of that and put me into the school board, I didn't even have an interview. They called me up and offered me a job in August of like 2012. And that's what launched my career in the school board. So then he put me through this series of tests and stuff at work, and I made some mistakes, and God talked to me in a dream, and I got knocked down into an EA position. And then through a series of humblings and other things that happened, I had to demonstrate the characteristics of God at work to people who were not nice to me, who were mean to me, who looked down on me, and they resented me. But God put me in this position where I got the opportunity to show true Christ-like character and stand up for those people and defend those people and have those people's back. And the minute that I did that, God automatically gave me back my youth work job. And he came to me in a dream. He said, you can choose to take it, or you can choose not to take it. But if you choose not to take it, I'm still going to move you. So you're not going to get to stay here, and you're not going to get to stay comfortable. God always calls us to things. He calls us to be obedient. He also says he will watch over our steps, and he will make sure that anything he calls you to, he will fund. So he called me into this position, and I accepted it. And he put me, even when I got back into a youth work position in the school board, they put me in a school that was really rough. And it was really hard on me, and I had a lot of doubt and a lot of fear and a lot of interesting things about that. But my spiritual mentor at the time told me that I was just going through a testing period again, And he was right, because I was only in that school environment for maybe 3 or 4 months. And through that, I learned how important it is to pray at work. So through this series of praying at work and praying at work and praying at work, even if I didn't feel like I was having an effect on that environment, the prayers were having an effect on that environment. And because of that, I got moved into another school, into another role. And then working with a series of students and some principals and some other things in those other schools somehow launched, not somehow, God launched this amazing thing where he built this reputation for me. He built a reputation for me that I was a desirable employee. And through God's character and God working on me, I have continued to succeed at work to the point where now, this current year, I got put into a new school, and I was really worried because at the last school I worked 4.5 years, and I had to build on this reputation that God said that I had. And I had to prove that I had the character and the tenacity and the ability and authority to do the job that I was doing. But because I did that, when he put together this team of people that I'm working with now at my current job, he handpicked my principal. He handpicked my spec ed teacher. He handpicked me to be in this team. And because he put this team together, I have full authority in my work. I have full authority to do what I need to do according to how God would do it, not how necessarily the powers that be in the world would want things to be done. But I am allowed to use the rules of God and the truth that is in God to implement strategies at school that actually work. Because God knows, just like what Pastor was talking about today in men's breakfast, he was talking about male authority and understanding true discipline and understanding how we raise up real men. So God has, just like, and Pastor's been talking about prospering, right? Prospering does not always look like money. Although God will do that, and I have testified before in a different one that God paid off my mortgage because of obedience. God is very much about being obedient to your call. There are days I have rough days. There are days where I don't feel like I can do my job. But God reminds me that he put me there. God reminds me that it is my responsibility to fulfill my call that he has called me to, and that he will help me walk through anything that is tough. And I started this year off with that authority in mind. I went through every room in my school. I prayed through every room in my school. I did not care what anyone thought about it. I happen to work in the Catholic school board, so they don't mind. And most of them were like, yeah, go ahead, pray in my room. And the ones that had really high behaviors or really high needs, some of those people, even though they weren't believers or they believe, but they're not sure about prayer and such, I prayed in their rooms, and they're like, can you come back and pray through our rooms? So you need to understand that if you really believe what you believe, walk it out. I guarantee you, regardless of the situations that you're in, regardless of what you think, God will start to prosper you in your work. He will start to prosper you in your relationships. He will start to prosper you in your finances. My wife and I have been able to sustain a single income home in this world, in this society, for almost 20 years. And everyone told us that's not possible, you can't do that. But we did, because God made it happen, because it was God's will for her to be home with my kids and raise them properly. And it is also God's will as a parent that I have the time to spend with my kids and the ability to do things. But when God prospers you, you have to share it, right? So we also do things for others in the church because we have a responsibility to show the world and each other that this is not just for me. It's for all of us. And this is why Russ wanted me to share it, because it's what Pastor's been talking about. And it's been what I've experienced. My experience of God has been that he is a loving, caring God who wants to look after you as long as you can follow him and do what he asks, regardless of how hard it might be. Because he needs you to be obedient to the call that he's called you to. Jeremiah 29:11 is my favorite scripture. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. He means it.
And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death.